27th, 2009 Board of Supervisors meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and would you rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The flags are shows you how broke we are.
The flag. It was a test. The state of California.
So we've all pledged our allegiance to the state of California this morning. So, how's it? Calaveras County? Oh, okay. Well, that's even better.
You hadn't heard about the change in order.
Okay, I'd like to read the report on the, this is a result of a closed session held on January 13th, 2009, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, conference with legal counsel regarding the existing litigation, two cases, Oakdale Irrigation District et al. And Calaveras County et al. Calaveras Superior Court case number 35081, and the Committee to Save Lake Tulloch versus County of Calaveras et al. Calaveras Superior Court number 35086, and there is nothing to report from that session. Okay. I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. We have a fairly small consent calendar this morning.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion for approval and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried 5-0. Mr. Lawton, we wanted to discuss the possibility in future meetings of not necessarily being held by this the 9-10 public comments. I mean, I'd like to move things along if we can. That this is published this way, but could we get together with the board and decide how to handle that in the future? The problem is that some of us have observed that we do a lot of hurry up and wait. That we have a 9-10 public comments on the agenda, so it's 9:05. So what do? We have to kind of sit around and talk for 5 minutes. So anyway, we'd like to have a change in procedure in the future, but we can't do it today. So we'll be taking a break until 9:10.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Then we can go visit.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order, and we'll get back to the item number 3, public comments. I want to remind you that I'm going to be limiting comments to 5 minutes per person, 15 minutes per topic, and I would also remind you to turn off your cell phones if you don't have them on vibrate, or turn them off. Yes, Mr. Dean.
Yes, Bob Dean, Calaveras County Water District. And I just wanted to ask the board to agendize at a future meeting for possible, certainly for discussion and possible action, a renewal of something I brought before the board 2 years ago, which was setting up a safety net for people who, through perhaps no fault of their own, are in a position where they can't afford to pay the public water and wastewater rates countywide. My thought at the time 2 years ago was to set up a Blue Ribbon Committee or some sort of a panel that would address this, including HRC and some of the other organizations that could bring some information to the table that would allow us to at least explore if this is even a feasible possibility. 2 years ago things were good. Today they're not. People's retirement incomes are in the toilet. We have a lot of serious considerations we have to make, and I'm sorry that we don't have something in place now that would address it. So I guess I'm coming from the perspective of better late than never. So if you would, I would ask the board to agendize it for discussion at some hopefully soon future date, so that we can move this process forward if you decide that this would be something worthwhile.
Okay, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. We will get that done as soon as we can. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Marta Johnson Brady. I'm a resident of Mokelumne Hill and District 2, 12 years in Moke Hill and 20 years in District 2. And today I'm here as a representative of the Mokelumne Hill Community Plan Task Force. I'm honored to present to the board our draft of our Moke Hill Community Plan. Early in the process of updating the Calaveras County General Plan, the county informed communities that funding for updating the individual community plans was not available. The County Board of Supervisors encouraged and empowered all the citizen groups to initiate and maintain their own planning group to update their community plan, and at the same time schedule at the same time that the county was updating its general plan. So with that in mind, 45 members came together from Mokelumne Hill to set up a community plan task force, and we held over 21 work sessions and 6 town hall meetings over the last 18 months. We discussed, revised, and updated the existing Mokelumne Hill Community Plan. We strongly believe that the people of Mokelumne Hill have voiced their vision for the community throughout this plan. We trust that the county and the county's consultants will incorporate this vision of the plan into the land use element of the Calaveras County General Plan. There are areas in the plan that are in draft form and that will require additional work, and we look forward to collaborating with the county and its consultants to address these areas regarding land use designations, density, and intensity. So on behalf of the Mokelumne Hill Community Plan Task Force, we thank you for allowing us to submit our draft. I have one for each of the county supervisors. Supervisor Walensky already has received one. We also, on December 23rd, submitted it to John Taylor, the Interim Community Development Director, Robert Selman, the Planning Director, who has since retired, and he turned it over to Robin Lewis of the Planning Department. Steve received it, Supervisor Walensky, and Mr. Lawyer Larry Mintier received one already. So we thank you, and I'll have one for each of the 4 remaining supervisors. Any questions?
Questions? Yes.
No questions, but I want to compliment the community and the leadership that came forward. It was broad-based. The process was extensive and sustained, and this document does truly reflect the will of the people of Mokelumne Hill. So thank you for your all. There's a bunch of you out there, I see, and you all did great work.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Marta. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Bill Pugh. I'm a resident of Wallace Lake Estates. Now, you may recall recently that our governor had a great idea, and that was to install a large solar field in the Mojave Desert, take the pressure off of PG&E. Unfortunately, that was shot down by some little ground squirrel. Not going to happen. So a friend of mine had an epiphany that sometimes simple things are better. And he's not willing to talk about it, but I am. I think Calaveras County could be a shining star in the state of California if they would consider this idea. Require all new housing to include solar on the roof. That may sound expensive, it's actually not. In a $300,000 house, over 15 years at 5%, the payment would be about $2,450. If you put the best solar system in the world on it, it might cost $30,000 prior to any rebates, which come and go. That $30,000 would add another $50 to that payment, making it only $2,500. Over a period of years, as houses grow, we could equal the solar field that was projected for the Mojave Desert and take tremendous pressure off of the PG&E lines. I think it's a chance for Calaveras County to step up and say, look, here's what we can do. That's the idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Anyone else wishing to address the board this morning?
Joe Kelly. Correspondence number 9 might be a good idea. It might be an idea to put that with item 4, so at least read it into the record so that people would have an idea what that correspondence was about. Also, correspondence 30 might be a good idea to read before item 6 is heard. So maybe we could see what a citizen's concept or concerns were about the word road. Now, last but not least, I'd like you to educate me so I can be an informed citizen. Since the public announcement that the Board of Supervisors meetings do not follow Robert's Rules of Order, what protocol has been adopted to be followed? Within the board's meeting protocol, what are the ramifications of a 5-0 polling of the board on Brown Act designation of a committee, and is that sufficient direction, Board of Supervisors direction, for a department head? Do you understand what I'm saying, what I'm asking?
I think so, but I'd like to see if County Council has any comment on this.
Thank you.
Well, the board's never adopted Robert's rules. The board's procedure is what I believe is called the rule of the chair, which means that...
And that's somewhat dictatorial, isn't it?
Well, no, not exactly. I think the chair follows Robert's rules in general. At any time, a board member can appeal from a ruling of the chair, and the board votes extemporaneously on a given issue. So it's a very informal practice, but it's worked well for this board. It works well for small boards. And I don't understand the second issue. So
the second issue pertains to when this board at times has polling consultation of the members, and you might have a 3-2 vote or a 5-0 vote. What I'm asking, and it is because you're trying to give direction to a department head, is that sufficient direction without a vote on a concept of it to be a Brown Act committee?
That's what you've answered in the past, Jim, as to what?
yeah.
No, sir, he didn't answer it in the past because he basically stated in the past that the board was a 5-0 polling vote. Now, that's the difference is that sufficient enough information for a department head to go forward, or is it required by this board to have a vote to give that sufficient a vote of yes, it is, or no, it isn't, to give the exact direction to that department head?
At the risk of wading into something that's going to get deeper the further I go, the county administrator is responsible for directing the work of department heads. The board provides guidance and input as a group to the county administrator with regard to day-to-day conduct of county affairs. So the assumption that the board votes 5-0 on a non-agendized issue to direct a department head to carry out a particular action would not be a statement that fully appreciates the organization of county government.
In the past of what I have sat through in meetings, that it was an agendized item, and the issue of creating it or the Brown Act implementation has been part of the agenda. In other words, it was a legal act. But now what I'm asking is, does the board need to take a vote, or is the 5-0 or is the polling sufficient information?
If the question is, once again, whether a committee is a Brown Act group, is bound by the Brown Act group, the statute requires that the committee be formed by board action, formal board action, by a resolution or an ordinance. That's all I can say. Any other committee appointed by a department head is not a Brown Act group, And department heads have the authority, if they so choose, with board direction, to establish an advisory group.
I'm sorry, the board has action on what, on advisory group?
I can elaborate on a memo if the board is interested, if the board has any questions about this. I think the dividing line is...
No, we've gone over this several times with Mr. Kelly. It's already been determined that the committee he's referring to was selected by the department head. The board gave direction, whether we polled or what have you, to the CAO, that was what occurred. This issue has been addressed in this meeting to Mr. Kelly at least 3 times. I think it's end of conversation.
I'm going to weigh in here a little bit. Mr. Kelly, I'm confused about whether you're talking about a generality or a specific instance. I mean, we frequently
Well, excuse me, sir, if I was going to talk a specific instance, then I would have to wait until the agenda item comes up. I'm using generalities at this point because in the past, this board has done polling and to give direction to a department head. I've seen it numerous times here. And if you wish, I will come back at the agendized item and bring the same issue up. I'm just trying to find out what a 5-0 polling of agreement with this board, when perhaps asked by a department head or is suggested by someone else on the board, what value does it have? Does it have no value? Then why are you polling?
Well, this is a kind of a thorny issue here, and Marita Callaway has suggested that we shouldn't talk about it, but I would like to give my opinion on this.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. It is a difficult task that we have here. We have to always be mindful of the things that are on the agenda that we can vote on, and when something comes up and a department head asks us, okay, I want to know how to go back and work this coming week. It's completely unacceptable in my mind to say, okay, well, let's agendize that and talk about it next week, about what you're going to do in this coming week. So for that reason, I think that it's totally appropriate in the open forum here that we would give the department head a sense of direction of a majority of the board feels like that this is the way you should handle it. It's not something that would go down with as much force as an ordinance or a resolution. It's just an indication of the sentiment or the feelings of the board on any particular matter. Now, if there is some implied suggestion that is a violation, that polling in front of everybody is a violation of the Brown Act, to me, that the Brown Act is an edict to keep people from going out in the hallway and deciding which way we would like to direct the department head. So, I mean, I want to conclude this discussion by saying we do the best we can do. You know, on any given day, we do the best we can do. If it doesn't satisfy you, I apologize. But
no apology necessary, sir. I'm just trying to be educated in the way the system of Calaveras County works. You know, I am very concerned about the Brown Act because it does say in there, ensure. And it should be, and I believe this, I can't remember the specifications of it, but to ensure that the people are knowledgeable of what their government is doing. We don't give up our sovereignty because we elect you. We elect you to represent us. And part of that is through the Brown Act and transparency. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have comment for the board this morning? Going once?
Does this include any road issues, or is this strictly what's on the menu?
This is specifically a time to bring before the board any issue that is not on the agenda. So if you have some concerns that you'd like to tell us about, then please come forward.
Well, my name is Dean Borgadalen. I'm here again on the Struckman Road issue. And there's been lots of mistakes, misunderstandings, and otherwise, I have a prepared statement I'd like to read.
Mr. Borgadellin, is this specifically on the agenda item that concerns the legal access?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I should have anticipated that we will be discussing that in greater detail later. Can you just maybe grab a seat there in front so you don't have to climb in and out? But we will be discussing that in greater length.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sorry about that. Is there anyone here who would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda? Okay, that concludes this item on the agenda. The next item we'll take up is item number 4, discussion and possible action regarding direction to the county staff regarding organizational structure of the planning and building and code enforcement programs. This is the county administrator is bringing this.
A brief summary, Mr. Chair. As you recall, in August, the board appointed John Taylor as interim community development director. One of his tasks assigned at that time was to return to the board with a recommendation on the organizational structure of community development, including the planning, building, and code enforcement programs. He came to your board on November 25th with a detailed report discussing the department and its organization, and made a recommendation that the board either retain CDA as an integrated agency or consider forming a different county department, merging several other functions. The board at that time voted to retain the CDA in its existing format. At the January 6, 2009 meeting, the board requested that the matter be brought before it once again for discussion and possible action. This item is in fulfillment of that request. And just to provide the board with a jumping off point, we presented in the staff report 3 possible options, but they are not dispositive, and the board can mix, match, slice, and dice as it pleases. One would be to disband the Community Development Agency and direct that the building and planning departments be restored as separate, freestanding departments with their respective director positions being established as board-appointed department heads pursuant to a subsequent staff report. 2, direct the combination of CDA with one or more existing county departments to form a new agency. Or 3, retain the Community Development Agency as an entity while pursuing organizational and budgetary reforms to complete the process of fully integrating CDA as a single unit with responsibility for planning, building, and code enforcement programs. Should the board choose an option other than continuing the CDA in its present status, the County Administrator's Office recommends that the board direct staff to bring back a full analysis of any changes to the fiscal year 2008-2009 adopted final budget or the county code necessary to implement the board's recommendation, and that the board direct staff to return for board action its analysis of any proposed budget or code changes. And other than that, I turn it to the hands of the board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lawton. At this time, I'd like to ask the supervisors if you have any comments. Okay, do we?
I have comments, but I'll wait for public input before making them.
Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing on this issue. Anybody who wishes to weigh in with suggestions or recommendations, could you please come and make your wishes known?
Morning. I'm Rod Weathers. I think you guys have seen me before. Gary hasn't, no.
Good morning, Rod.
Hi, Rod. Well, weighing in with this, I mean, I'm with the Builders Association, and we've seen the whole gambit. You know, everything all the way down the line. We've seen it when it was separate, and we've seen what it has happened when it was together. And I'd say that, you know, if you're discussing things, you know, figure out what were the benefits of combining them. And then look at, because it only encompassed 2 departments really, we left Public Works out. And so we ended up still with not a congruent flow, which is what was, I think, the original intent of being able to combine it into a community development agency, is that all those departments would work together. However, they still have not, and I think you guys have known what has transpired about, the lack of the continuity. And then we've seen environmental health now split off from building, and so now we're back to having one more separate thing out. So, if you're going to look at together, you either have to look at the whole or leave things as status quo, which was separate, and with actually a good base plan for people to be able to obtain their permits. And that is a process that either is given to them in a written form or through written form, of course, is the best, but to be able to guide someone through that. And Russ knows about going down to, I think you went to San Joaquin County? Stanislaus, and then finding out that you're set with somebody that basically guides you through that process. And I agree with that. I think, as long as you've got somebody that can take someone through the process, otherwise it becomes difficult for an average person, just an average homeowner, or even as contractors. Sometimes every time we come down, there's a new form, a new guideline, or those things, and we don't have that access. I mean, well, we have somewhat of an access, but we don't know when changes occur. So, and we talked about trying to get some sort of a correspondence, even just with the builders, to be able to be heads up on what's happening down here at the county and changes and those things. Because you come down and then suddenly we have to have a new form that's then signed by the owners, and it's just one thing after the next. And we're dealing with all of that along with trying to figure out what's going on with the department. So when you start looking at all those things put together, it's almost better that you just leave them apart. And that's kind of our feelings, is that it worked well for years, in our opinion, as far as the process was concerned, as long as you knew what you were going to, what department you were going to next to get those approvals, and what was required. However, when you don't have that continuity, it's hard to understand that. So if you have just 2 departments together, which was building and planning, I don't know whether it was worth the cost to be able, to combine 2 but leave out on-site and leave out Public Works. So, that was kind of what you saw down at Stanislaus, was that there's someone there to guide you through the steps. And usually when you went to building, they would normally guide you through, you need to go get this signed off, and you need to go get that signed off. But we would like to see something that sets people up to be able to go have that direction to go there before they ever get to the building department, that they go get all their sign-offs, that they have met all the requirements from all the different departments for their particular project. So that's my only thing with that, is just that, is it worth the cost to combine just 2, or is it better to combine all, or is it better just to leave them in this type of economy all separate and save some money for a change, And then come up, if you're going to have a plan like that, come up with a good plan that has workable solutions, that has guidelines, and a process that goes through to guide people through the building and planning process. So that's, those are just my comments on those, and we've seen the fallout from what was, I think, was it was a great idea to start. However, there was no plan to get there, and I think was probably one of the drawbacks to the whole situation, was that, we had something that we're trying to jump on the boat with the other counties in the state that had these, and that they saw in Calaveras County, saw how well they worked in other counties. However, you have to have a plan to go into a plan, I think. And I think that's where maybe things got a little bit lax was, you just went there and thinking that somebody was going to come in and be able to just guide you through that process. Well, it ended up stirring up more things than it was probably worth. So anyway, but that's my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Rod.
Hi, gentlemen, ladies. I've been doing this for over 30 years in Calaveras County.
State your name, please.
My name is Clyde Clapp. I live in your district.
Yes, good morning.
Anyway, I've been doing this for over 30 years. It's always been great. I started when Parget was here. I'd walk down, I'd hand my plans to Parget. He'd put one hat on, stamp it, take the other hat, put it on, stamp it, put the other hat on, stamp it. He pretty well did all of it. And I think you guys had 2 people that did everything. And I can remember when you came on board, Tom, it was the same way. And they changed it, and I've always have got my permits. I've never had problems getting my permits, no matter. And it seems like you guys try to change it because you're having problems or something, so let's change it. And that actually causes more problems with me because now it gets changed, but still it's very small. I mean, I can go to the building department now. I pretty much know everybody there, and they do work you through it. But the changing, when you do change something, then it does make more work on my part because I'm not used to what's going on then. And, that's pretty much, I've always been able to get a permit, so that's the big deal. As long as I can get a permit, I don't care.
Thank you very much.
Hi, gentlemen. I'm Terry Weatherby. I'm the only structural engineer in 4 counties. I don't know if you guys knew that. Yeah, there's a lot of civils, but I'm the only structural engineer. This debacle with the building department that we've been going through for the last 3 or 4 years, it looks like we're over it. They're functioning tremendously well. They're probably the most efficient they've ever been. But I really have to tell you that having a community development director, like all the cool counties down in the valley in the Bay Area, I really don't think that was the answer. I think you're paying someone a whole bunch of money that in this current market we just can't afford. And I was going to suggest to you that being somewhat familiar with some of the building department's problems in budgeting and et cetera, and that they have hardly any work, and planning seems to be overwhelmed. It seems to me that building is the only department that should be running the projects through because they have the time to do it right now. They can get it through Public Works, they can get it through Environmental Health, they can get it through Fire, they can deal with all the different agencies and be the lead, like Rod Weathers suggested, I think, without the CDA in there, questioning everything that they do all the time. They know the code, they know the building code, and they're extremely helpful. The people that you have there now, you guys are just the best individuals in any of the surrounding counties. I can't say enough nice things about them. But anyway, so I'd urge you, I don't think you need a CDA director. I think it's one more level of bureaucracy that you're paying for. So I'd urge you to maybe separate the departments the way it was, and building can be lead, and each department still has its concerns. And planning, don't get me wrong, planning is still going to be the holdup because they're inundated. And anyway, that's my opinion. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Mr. Weatherby.
It's okay.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
We consider her one of the boys.
Check the Adam's apple.
Mr. Chairman and honorable supervisors and lady. I'm Al Segalit. I'm representing the Calaveras County Taxpayers Association, and I concur with most of what we're hearing now. Over the last 40 years, I've been a professional real estate person in the county, and also had done business with the building department and the planning department. And my experiences have been mostly very favorable. It was handled in an efficient manner, and it's only in the last few years that the situation seemed to go to hell in a handbasket, so to speak. The question, I think, before us is what's the purpose of having this new agency, Community Development Agency, or Community Development Director? Is there some reasoning or some ideological thought that this is going to bring about some significant and fundamental change in the future of county government? If that's the case, let's get it on the table and look at it openly. Grab it by the ears and look it in the eyeballs and say, okay, is this what your plan is? Let's look and see if this works. Okay, to ooze into more bureaucracy without clearly knowing where you're going and what your purpose is just creates havoc. And I think this is what's happened. I guess from the last 50 years, in just about every community in California, the various departments have collaborated with each other. They're quite capable of collaborating. And you can't have a one-stop shop, which is what was referred to by previous speakers, basically, where somebody would come and then be directed as to what's needed for their application. It's true that we're getting more regulation all the time. We need to start facing that and find out how we can start to reduce this regulation. Right now we're thinking about how to accommodate it, but we need a sea change in thinking, or maybe a new paradigm. I don't know what it is, but we need to, the taxpayers and the property owners need to be able to trust government to function properly and protect their individual rights, which include property rights. So I recommend that I think the first alternative, it was a little bit complex for me, but I think the first alternative was to return to the departments functioning independently. That means there's somebody responsible on each department for what occurs in those departments, and that they would be under the supervision of the county administrative officer, which I think is his job title. He's supposed to be in charge of all these departments. We have had the experience of putting somebody in between that, and we've had a fracturing of the lines of responsibility. And with it, the fracturing of the terrible results that we've experienced. And this is not just because of the economy. Even if we had a booming economy, I think the same thing we're talking about would still apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segala. Anybody else want to comment on this item?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Lou Mayhew. I would encourage you to complete the process of integration. I think there are many examples of difficulties when department heads were appointed directly by the board. What you really want is an administrative structure that allows your professional staff to work, to do a professional job without too much direct political interference. It seems to me option one would not do that, to allow the board to appoint directly department heads. I think that undercuts the CAO and a professional structure within the county that allows your professional staff to do their job in a professional manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayhew. Okay, I'm going to give just another second for people's comments. Okay, hearing none. Oh, boy, you got in right under the wire.
Mr. Chair, before Mr. Fry begins, I just want to make it, I want to make it clear that all department heads are currently appointed by the Board of Supervisors subject to the supervision of the county administrator, that this would not be a unique arrangement. I just want to be sure that seemed to me there's an impression by the previous speaker that these planning and building departments would be treated somehow differently, when in point of fact, all departments have professional department heads who are appointed by the board but supervised by the CAO.
Thank you for that. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is George Fry, and I would like to speak in terms of leaving the departments separate, having a strong leader in the planning department and a strong leader in the building department. It worked for many, many years. I was part of that process years ago. I worked for Mr. Harrington, and we had a very smooth running operation. And when John Bargett was there, he took care of business. And I don't see the need to spend $150,000 with benefits and salaries to have somebody oversee two departments. Like I said, it worked well for years, and it would continue to work well. And I hope that you take this seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Okay.
Can we re-comment maybe later after the presentation?
No.
Because of the seriousness of this item, I will allow Mr. Weathers to come up right now, but we will be closing public comments. Okay. You had your chance.
I just wanted to hear the report afterward.
Okay. Yes.
May I?
Certainly.
Good morning, Rosemary Wilson, McCullamy Hill. I'm not in the building trade or planning, and one thing I would like to ask is that whatever structure is put in place, those average people on the street, and I think I'm around about average, can sometimes find it pretty difficult to work their way through the building, planning, environmental, public works. I'll say maze, but that's only because I'm outside of the structure. I think it would help if there were set procedures in place, so that written procedures, so that people could be given the same advice. I think for the same question, or at least follow set procedures. There was a comment made that a gentleman had been working with the system for a long time and knew a lot of the people and had no problems. I'd like there to be no problems whether you knew a lot of people or whether you were just going into the organization sort of cold. And I'd also like for people, if I were to show up in planning and need instead to be talking to somebody in the building department, that those people would be the person I would first talk to would be willing to tell me where to go, but in but not say, well, you should just go, you're not in the right department, you need to go someplace else. Should I actually have some guidelines and some steps that they can hand out to individuals like myself who might want to build an extension, I don't know, put up a garage or whatever, so that you there would be a sort of a roadmap to the situation. I'm not sure whether there is one already, but that's what I'd like to see. There didn't seem to be one when I approached the county government several years ago for something. So that's my opinion as a average person in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Rosemary, your last name is
Wilson.
Wilson, yes. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board on this item? Yes, Mr. Fry.
I just have a question. Where is the program at this point in terms of hiring a new planning director? I would think that this would be most urgent given the situation that's going on at this point in time.
You said that you had previous experience here. Would you like to apply?
No, thank you.
I'm being very facetious, but I agree with you that that's probably the most important task that we have in front of us, is to get somebody sitting in the planning director's chair. Okay, one last chance. Okay, seeing nobody moving toward the microphone, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back for comments from the board. Who would like to start off?
I'll start, since none of my male colleagues wanted to go first. Oh, yeah, I'm one of the boys.
We're having trouble with our Adams apple.
Land use issues are probably one of the most emotional, complex, convoluted, contentious issues that this county or any county has, bar none. I want to go back to Rod's opening comments. What are the benefits? Well, those of you that have been here for at least 5 years or more know that we had a study, the Citygate study that we did, based on the input from the building community, the development community, and the public to address some of the concerns. So I'm hearing something different now, generally from the group, than what we heard if you go back and read the Citygate study. And based on the Citygate study, and it was a split decision on the board to implement it, but we did, to try and address some of the concerns that the industry had about building, planning, septic, and so forth. So we put a community development agency together. And part of those concerns were, so there'd be cross-training so that when you went to the counter, someone who understands building could also give you some input on your planning questions, or vice versa, or on septic, or the famous current one, driveways. And the other was when there were different interpretations of some of the codes that were applied by planning and that were applied by building. So we took the concerns of the public and we put the agency together. And so there's some real positive things that have come out of having a community development agency. One being that we do have staff that are cross-trained. And some of the interpretations of codes are now interpreted the same among the two groups. So the goal really is, if you look at goal versus process, because what we're discussing is process and we need to really look at the goal, is to guide people through this process. I support having a community development agency. And for whatever reason, the septic was taken out of the building subset of the CDA and put in environmental health. I mean, we can play those games as things change over the years. and we can always bring it back to the building department. It was just due to circumstances at the time. Doesn't mean it's any better off in environmental health than it is or was in the building department. So I support having a agency or a department with the subsets, because I think the benefits, going back to what Rod said, outweigh what some of the concerns are. Now, I'm also having to approve a budget for Calaveras County where there is no money. So at this point, I cannot support funding a community development director position. In place of that, though, I would like to see a co-op team, possibly, under the leadership of our CAO, so that we cannot lose the benefits that we gain by having a community development agency. I would want Rosemary to be able to go to the counter and get information from the same person on planning issues, on building issues, to guide people through the process if the goal is to help the public. So I would support not filling a community development director at this point because the county can't afford it. But the concept is what I don't want to lose. And it's like if any of you belong to co-ops for vegetables and there's community markets. I mean, it's no different that we have a community development team, lowercase c, lowercase d, to still accomplish the same things and have the benefits that have occurred through having a community development agency. We need leadership, and somehow that has to happen without paying for the position at this point in time. That's my comments.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Walensky.
Well, listening to the comments, it would appear that things have improved and have never been worse. That we had some issues to deal with, but didn't deal with them very well. But the comment that struck me the most significant was the sense of nostalgia in the room. Yeah, the Pargette days were great when we had 2 people over there. And actually, it was a lot easier to get one answer when there were only 2 people, and when the laws were simpler, and when we hadn't had 30 years of litigation that has created a very complex maze to navigate through, before we had the state-imposed standards that we have to live with, and before life got complicated. And I long for those days, too. The problem is that life and circumstances have significantly altered over the last 30 years, and we have some things that we have to live with, that we have to live up to. Now, Marita referred to one study, but there were actually 3, and they found the following things, and this is a real quick summary. They said that we had issues with leadership of our departments, that line authorities were confused and sometimes conflictive, both within departments and between departments, that we had structural problems in our delivery of service, that it was highly balkanized between 4 departments in some people call it a maze, I call it a gauntlet. They beat on you, and if you fall, you're done, and if you get through the end, maybe you go on to fight another day. They said that our working systems, our system of information delivery was flawed, that our documents were in conflict, that our general plan was inadequate, that our zoning code was inconsistent with it, and that our community plans were inconsistent with both. in some cases. It said that we were inefficient, that instead of being seamless in our transactions, we were all bollocksed up. What they didn't say, and I'll add to that list, is that we had a highly politicized system in which we had a number of directors of public works and planning come up against politically unpopular circumstances that were their legal mandate and requirement that led to a level of pressure that they could not withstand. And we have had a turnover rate in the last 4, 5, 6 years that has been truly astonishing, and no wonder we can't seem to get out the door, despite our high ideals and our wishes to be a good service in a good county. Now, those are our problems. So when people say things were just great, I really think that we have some form of amnesia going on here, because many of us had projects that took years to get through and were quite astonishing in their complexity and the different kinds of answers you could get from the same question, and the multiple costs, double bills. You didn't make it in time, so you'll have to pay another round of fees. That wasn't the good old days. That sucked, okay? Just personally speaking. So how are we going to deal with this now with, as Marita says, a financial crisis, but a need for service that is, and service improvement? I forgot to mention one thing. It was also noted that our working culture was deficient, that the idea of public service was not the attitude you got at the desk or behind the desk, that we didn't see ourselves as responsive to public will. I think we were more responsive to people who made the connections over time and had the personal acumen or the repeated contacts so that you finally figured out the maze or the gauntlet and didn't get hit so many times going through. But for those people who are average citizens, this was an impossible, inscrutable, and nearly hopeless situation to get through, let alone expensive. Because actually time is money for many of these things, especially when there was high levels of inflation or building costs were going up. Maybe we have a little breather on that for a moment, so maybe we've got some time to get this right. But here's how it would look to me right now. First, it makes sense, as all of the studies recommended, to do our best to consolidate information, to build a working culture and a set of protocols that were functional and responsive to public need and law. So the CDA concept remains, I think, our truest hope to get it right long term. Secondly, I would say that the comments about the environmental health, especially septic and on-site sewage issues, and the road issues really do belong in that mix. That it doesn't help to get part of it under one roof and then keep on bouncing off. It may make the gauntlet shorter or fewer stops on the clubbing. But in the end, I think it is important that we get all things related to planning and building under one roof with a line authority and a working culture that is clear. So here's what I would propose for the moment. I think we need to save that $170,000. I think that's important just for the, if we're going to keep other services going here, we've got to be efficient in every way. But instead of hiring 2 department heads and asking our CAO to take yet another high-maintenance operation under his wing, my view would be that it is imperative at this moment that we get somebody with the following characteristics: somebody with a deep planning background, somebody capable of being a planning director, but also a strong enough administrator and decent enough with finance so that they can manage the entire acquisition and ongoing transition to a seamless and consolidated department. We would save money by not hiring a planning director. This would be a person who would serve in the function of planning director, but also CDA director, and assist and facilitate in what has obviously been an awkward transition, but one that is necessary nevertheless. leave this comment with one additional thing, which is if you look around the counties in California, the ones that have gotten through this and really put it all under one roof with a true one-stop under one administration and with the right kinds of protocols to serve, those are the counties that are actually getting a lot more accolades from their public than what we've been receiving here. What I would ask is enough understanding of the complexity of our moment so that we don't have a nostalgia that has no basis in present requirements, but that we embrace the forms of change that get us to where we need to go. We have to stop beating up on each other. We have to stop politicizing the department. And when somebody makes an unpopular but legal decision, forcing them into a survival mode or an exit, we have to let this process complete itself in order for building and planning to accomplish its goals and facilitate projects. So my proposal is one CDA director with strong planning background and capable of doing the planning director role, a strong building official, chief building official, and a consolidation, not immediately, but that the goal of that person would be over the next 2 years to bring on-site sewage and at least the road engineers under an umbrella that is seamless and effective.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Tryon.
Okay, well, I'll give a different point of view. I am for terminating the Community Development Agency and going back to 2 standalone departments. Marita talks about, well, we don't want to lose the gains we've made by having a Community Development Agency. Well, I'd like somebody to go over with me exactly the gains we've made over the last 2 years since we formed a Community Development Agency. I mean, Steve gives all the fine rhetoric, but what was the performance over the last 2 years? It doesn't match the rhetoric. Where sort of are we now? I was not, I'll just admit that I was adamantly opposed to forming a community development agency in the first instance. I spoke strongly against it. The board, or a majority of the board, was strongly in favor of it. The other 2 board members that have spoken have talked about how we went out to outside consultants, and boy, the consultants came in and said, this is what we should do, and my golly, that's what we did. Well, in my opinion, the board was totally committed, as was the CAO at the time, which wasn't Bob, to having this organizational structure. And I think what the consultant did was basically gave the board and the CAO what the board and the CAO wanted that consultant to give to the board and CAO. And then we hired a community development agency director. We did some more studies that basically said, oh my God, we've got to change management styles, we've got to do all this. And none of that, to put it bluntly, was successful. As some of the testimony here this morning has commented on, I think we do have a well-functioning public works department at the current time, and it's well organized. I think we have a well-functioning building department at the present time that's well-functioning. I think we have a well-functioning and well-managed environmental health department that's working and functioning, and the bottleneck, in my opinion, remains the planning department. To say that, boy, we just put all these things together and we're going to get utopia, well, you aren't going to get utopia by putting all these things together. One of the reasons I was opposed to the combination in the beginning was I don't see a lot of commonality between what the building department does and what the planning department does. The building department doesn't do environmental reviews. They don't do zone changes. They don't do general plan issues. They don't do those things. The building department goes out and makes sure you build to code. They check the plans and make sure that the plans are drawn to code. So I don't see that there's some, there's some great commonality of interest here, that the combination is greater than the parts. I guess you probably could say if you had, just absolute ideal management everywhere in the process, that maybe the combination would be greater than the parts. But I think that's, in my opinion, that would be very difficult to obtain. And the problem then is you get a community development agency director with all these, and if you don't have a good one, then you do have total chaos in every department, which has happened when we brought building into planning under a community development agency. So I don't see, and then you get the super department head. So the board then does not hire, and I think the board should be hiring and firing the department heads. So then the board only hires and fires the community development agency and doesn't have any say, because it's not a department head, on public works or environmental health or building or planning. And I think the citizens, when they elect their elected representatives, expect a little more accountability than what that formulation or organizational structure would provide. So I would like to go back to independent, standalone departments at this point. Maybe in the future, when we're functioning better, and it's awfully hard to do a combination when you have a train wreck. And come up with a new organizational structure. And I think we need to break building and planning apart and get both working properly and effectively and efficiently before we start, on these sort of grandeur, we're going to solve our problems by just combinations. I don't think we're going to solve our problems by just combinations. So I don't view at all that having to, when you come in with a project, first off, you go to planning and make sure you meet all the codes and the general plan and all that, and then you go to public works, or usually planning sends the project out to public works. It comes back and says what you have to do to meet the road codes and ordinances, and what you have to build, and the structural integrity of the road, et cetera. They send it out to environmental health, and environmental health looks at it and says what the environmental health standards are, and then you go to the building department, you get a building permit, you show the plans, they're all signed off on, they meet the code, the plan checker checks them, and then you go out and you hire a contractor and you start building, and the building inspectors go out and look at it and look at the plans and make sure that you're building it to code. I don't think, if those departments are working properly, that's not a difficult process. In fact, most of the developers don't have to go to each of those departments. The plans go out and the comments come back. And sometimes you have to, you go to the department and negotiate and say, well, wait a minute, why don't, particularly if you hire an engineer or something, an engineering firm, then they'll interface for you, and they already know a lot of the codes, and the issues will get worked out. But I don't see how this combination works for the county going forward at this time. And so I'm for 2 standalone departments.
Supervisor Toffanelli.
Well, I don't think it's any secret how I feel. I campaigned openly about my feelings about the CDA, and I was not in favor of it then, and I'm not in favor of combining both departments now. I don't think we are a large enough county to do so. Certainly with our budget coming next year, the amount of money to be spent for a CDA director is enormous. the number of counties that were mentioned here, the counties that were mentioned here earlier that do have this function were a lot larger counties than we are. My background is construction, and I've dealt with counties that have both ways, a CDA or a combined one-stop shop walk-in, and I've dealt with counties where it's each process is different. Although they could be housed in the same department or the same building that you go into. I just can't see the expenditure in this experiment that's gone on for the last 2 years that has, in my opinion, not been successful. For whatever reasons, whether we had the right director in there or not. Certainly with the right planning head in there and the right building head in there, those departments on their own would run smoothly. There are separate processes, as Tom has pointed out. I wasn't here for the studies that were done on the board and the recommendations that were given from those studies. But I do know that we've spent 2 years trying to have this department run successfully, and in my opinion, it hasn't. And from a private sector looking at it, when something like that happens, at some time somebody says, let's pull the plug on it and regroup and see what we can do to start over, or disband that and go on to something that's productive. And I think it would be very productive at this point to have separate departments and get it going smoothly, find the right planning department head, and get those departments running back smoothly, and then possibly in the future, if we found the right CDA director that could transcend both departments into a smooth one-stop shop, then that would be something I would be in favor of. But this time I can't be. I'm in favor of splitting both departments.
Okay, thank you for your comments. All right, I want to give my 2 cents here as well. Mr. Mayhew mentioned earlier this concept about professionalism, and the Board of Supervisors should stand up above and put an organization together that functions well. Shortly after I became a supervisor, I decided to kind of immerse myself for a couple of days in the planning and building department over there, and I went over and worked at the counter. And I subscribe to this theory about management by walking around. I think I perhaps alienated a couple of people in the department because I was there, but I rolled up my sleeves and I wanted to see what it was all about. And I observed some functional deficiencies, some pretty unfortunate attitude problems, frankly. I think that if I could wave a wand and create a department, it would be one that was more like a one-shop or one-stop shopping. And Mr. Weathers commented about the field trip that we took down to Stanislaus County, and it's really I mean, they've been at it for maybe longer than we have up here with dealing with a larger population, but the system that they have there works very well. You bring a set of plans in, and you sit down. It's not a kind of a confrontational attitude that you are facing somebody, kind of standing across the desk from you. Everybody's sitting down, and the applicant doesn't have to move. Whether they're talking to the planning or the building department or public works, those agencies are close enough by that the applicant sits in a chair and people come to them. That's maybe utopia, and it'll be a long time before we get there in this county. But I'm going to give a couple of terrible examples that will indicate to my fellow supervisors and perhaps the people that are sitting here what it can go wrong. in the function the way we're now set up. There's a family out that has a piece of property on Pool Station Road that's not in my district, but I drive by it fairly frequently, and this family has a 5-acre parcel in the ag zone. And they're trying to incrementally improve it with the ultimate goal of to move out of the Bay Area and build a home here. They want to move to this county, and I think that's a frequently occurring scenario. When they asked in the planning department, okay, here's the situation. I've got a couple of containers. I want to put them close together, with a space in between, put a roof over the top of them, put doors on the front of it. Do I need a permit for that? And they're told by the planning department in the same building over there, no, you don't need a permit for that. So they proceeded to spend a lot of money, time and effort to put a roof over this container, and all of a sudden the building department went by and red tagged it and said, what are you doing? Now, I would submit to you that that's a train wreck. That's a dysfunctional organization it's a terrible thing to have happen to a person coming here asking all the right questions and getting all the wrong answers. And I would like to fix that. I would like to make sure that at the end of our discussion here, we have in place at least an attitude, starting with the board, that we would like to have that not continue, that there should be consistent answers. Another situation that I was involved in was one of my constituents in District 5 came to me, he was at wit's end because he wanted to build a building like a shop in his backyard. He had a 4-acre parcel in Rancho Calaveras, and he had been struggling with the building department to get this thing permitted. And he had a set of plans that was one of these proprietary type of metal buildings where the plans were done and pre-engineered. But he was having the greatest difficulty. He had been here 5 times and been turned away because his application wasn't complete. And so he came to me at my office hours and he said, here's what I'm giving them. Why won't they give me a permit? And so I looked it over carefully, and they had a list that said that you're supposed to put all this information on one sheet. You had to have your site plan, your as-built for your sewer and where your water is and your road and your access and everything, and certainly his building plans for his structure. So I said, George, you have all the information that you need is on these 4 sheets of paper. You just need to consolidate it on one sheet of paper. And so he said, I can't do that. And I would submit to you that if we had the right attitude at our counter over there, that we could assist people through that. So I told him, okay, you have to get an engineer involved in this. You have to spend a few bucks to get this all consolidated. So when you do get it consolidated, come back to me and I'll go with you to the counter. Now here's a gentleman that had been here 5 times. I'm going with him on the 6th time, and I'm standing behind, and he submits very proudly this thing that had been consolidated by this engineer, and the person at the counter said, this is great, this is great, this is great. Oh, gosh, you're going to have to come back with a cross-section view of the property. The property was dead flat. It was a 4-acre parcel that had about 1.5 foot of grade change from front to back, and this is an in-service deficiency, a in-service training that we are lacking in the departments, plural, that we have to get our hands around that, and I'm not sure that we would be able to do that with a disassociated, separated 2 departments. I think that in my view, and I'm certainly only one opinion up here, but I think that there has to be, again, starting at my phrase earlier, starting at the top, that we have to communicate to these departments and to the people that are working over there that our sense is that we should be more helpful, we should be more accommodating, we should just be more friendly in our attitude toward people and more helpful. So I've been kind of going all the way around. I wanted to tell you the solution to that, and you'll remember this, Jeff. I asked for the chairman or the chief building official to come up, and I asked, here's a situation where the gentleman is being asked to come back yet a fifth or sixth time to bring a cross-section view, but the topographical map there was indication that it was almost as flat as a pool table, so why do you need a cross-section view of a pool table? So Jeff took out his red pen and signed that off. Now, I don't know. I'm rambling on here, and I apologize, but I'm trying to express my frustration with the way that the departments work. Another thing that I observed by working at the counter was that some people stand there for maybe up to 15 or 20 minutes, and they get up to the desk and they say, is this the Public Works Department? And there's no organizational chart on the wall. I made a suggestion that we have an organizational chart, that we have people with name tags. I mean, I've spoken to a number of constituents that come to me with problems, and I said, well, who did you talk to? And they said, well, I don't know who I talked to. It was just a woman with short brown hair. Well, we ought to take, we ought to get more, each of us ought to get more skin in the game. I think that speaks well for having a more of a friendly affect at the departments there. I also made a suggestion that we put an organization chart up on the wall and have pictures of the people that are working in the department, so that when you're waiting for that 20 minutes and you're standing around and you're looking at the wall, that you would at least know the name of the person that you're going to talk to, and perhaps in the back of your mind you'd know who his boss was if you didn't get the answer that you wanted. But you know what happened to that idea? There were people in the department that said, I don't want my picture on the wall. And there may have been some good reasons for that. I don't know, but it's a very an attitudinal deficiency. So anyway, summarizing my statements, we've got two people that said that they would like to keep the organization structure but not fund the position. We have two people that said that they want to go back to a previous way and eliminate the CDA. In my mind, I'm going to have to fall on the side of the argument that the organizational structure should stay intact. I'm not in favor of funding the position right now. I think that the singular most serious problem that this board has to deal with right now is to get somebody sitting in the chair of the planning director. Someone sitting there that has the background and ability to make decisions, and it would be wonderful if that person had some familiarity in a department that was functioning well, that the interdiscipline of building and planning was something that was familiar and easy for that person. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm acting a lot like Supervisor Walensky. I'm talking too much, but I'm sorry, Steve. But anyway, I wanted to make one final comment, is that this, in my view, the CDA director, when we have the ability and the economic circumstances to justify somebody being there, would be a person that would be the point person for the county, for recruitment of businesses, for somebody that would have the function of being an ambassador for the county to go out and to be the person that a corporation that was thinking about relocating to this county would come and get answers and get positive feedback and would be able to interact with the board and with the CAO to make accommodations for companies that could come here or might choose to come here to increase the economic vitality of this county and the region. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that if we keep the agency structure in place, this would just be like an unfilled wish list that we would eventually get to. but we can't. I acknowledge that we don't have the economic resources to do it right now. So anyway, I'm very much in favor of keeping the CDA, and so that would be, I would entertain a motion from somebody that would get us off dead center here.
I need to make a comment. We're saying we want it, but we're not going to fund it. So my feeling is that we're not giving staff any direction on structure. So if we don't fund it, but we want it, then what kind of structure are we asking to have? And given that we are not funding the position, then I would have to say I would want to go back to, God, I hate doing this, to what Tom and Gary are saying. But we can't say we want something and we don't fund it, or if we don't fund it, then we have to give an alternative to staff because we're holding up the recruitment of a planning director until we make a decision. So, my colleagues, what is it that we're saying?
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Well, wait a minute, Tom.
Well,
yeah, Tom, I'm just saying.
I mean, you can't have what the three of you advocate. You can't have a CDA structure and nobody at the top. And now
wait a minute. Just to correct the record here, I proposed a CDA director who would take also the place of a planning director with a strong planning background. It accomplishes both. It is a structural response to the question, and it does resolve the economic issue. So although there are no seconds for that, that is in the record here, and I hope people will refer to it, even at the risk of speaking too much.
Then there's my recommendation that we do a co-op. So
okay.
Well, so those are the two structural.
You have the votes.
Okay, never mind. It's getting too convoluted, and
I move we accept point 1.
I'll second that motion. Why don't you read it into the record, just to be clear, Gary?
Point 1 is disband the Community Development Agency and direct the building and planning departments to be restored as separate freestanding departments with their respective directors' positions being established as board-appointed department head positions pursuant to a subsequent staff report. And also, at the bottom to that, should the board choose an option other than continuing the CDA in its present status, the county administrator's office recommends that the board direct staff to bring back a full analysis of any changes to the FY 2008-2009 adopted final budget or the county code necessary to implement the board's recommendation, and that the board directs staff to return for board action its analysis and any proposed budget or code changes.
The second still holds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 There you go.
Opposed? No.
No.
Okay, the motion prevails on a 3-2.
Can we take a brief recess, Mr. Chair?
No, we have to stay right here.
What? Well,
we'll be back.
I second that.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
God.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order, and we are on item 5 now. This is a discussion and possible action regarding, there must be a typo here. This says 2003-114. No, there isn't a typo, apparently. 2003-114 zoning amendment and tentative subdivision tract map, Wallace Lake Estates, Unit 2 for John D. Reinen, LLC. This is continued from 7/14/2007 and 1/06/2009, Community Development Agency.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and John Taylor, former interim director of the former Community Development Agency. And, interim spokesperson on this particular project. Just as a reminder, your board did have this item in front of you last, it was January 6th. As indicated in the staff report and in your comments, that this is an item that had originally been heard by the Board of Supervisors in July of 2007. We brought this application before you with a recommendation to find the mitigated negative declaration inadequate as written, and we've suggested that there's a substantial evidence of a fair argument that the project as proposed will have a significant impact on the California tiger salamander. And we've recommended to deny the mitigated negative declaration. We have not changed that recommendation from last January 6th. However, in the interim, on January, you opened a public hearing and closed that public hearing, and you held it over to today's meeting in order to be able to make a decision or to provide the board the opportunity to make a decision that may, in fact, include approving the action. As you will recall, we had advised the board that you were constrained in making a finding or taking an action that would, in fact, approve the project because we didn't have 100% of the information in front of you. We didn't have the mitigation monitoring plan. We didn't have the mitigated negative declaration in front of you at that point in time. And in the meantime, we provided the board with that information. So also in the interim, since the previous meeting, our staff and county council has been in consultation with representatives of the applicant to try to arrive at some maybe acceptable mitigation programs that your board, if you choose to accept the applicant's pleadings, that you would in fact approve that. We provide you the opportunity in the alternatives that we've identified here. We've identified an opportunity in number 3, adopt the mitigated negative declaration for the project with findings as revised in Exhibit A and approve the project, the zoning amendment and tentative subdivision tract map. Generally, we have not strayed from our earlier recommendation that we felt that the information provided in the original report to the Board of Supervisors was made inadequate by the comments we received from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding the adequacy of the environmental document with respect to the California tiger salamander. But also in the interim, and yesterday, as a matter of fact, your board did receive additional information, or at least additional communication from East Bay Mud regarding their concerns or their interest in the project. And we've also received a letter this morning from the Wallace Lake Estates commenting upon that East Bay Mud letter. So staff is here to be of assistance to your board, but we brought it back to you for your appropriate attention and possible action.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just as a point of order here, I want to remind people that the public hearing is closed on this item unless there's significant new information. That we will be talking to staff and talking to supervisors without reopening the public hearing. Mr. Elias, do you have a comment?
I really did want to have a chance to comment on the project. Unfortunately, because of illness in the family, I haven't been able to make the meeting, so I was just hoping to say something that I think could be relevant, if possible. Please. Thank you.
Mr. Elias, you heard me say that the public hearing was closed. People had ample opportunity through many previous meetings to bring information forward. So anyway, I'd like to bring it back to the board for further discussion. We put this item, we continued it until this date certain so that Supervisor Toffanelli could, and all of us could get our knowledge renewed on this thing. We didn't have the whole packet last time. Now we do. Any comments?
Well, I have a question or two before we do a round of comments.
Okay.
Receiving this East Bay Municipal Utility District information and the Wallace District response, I wanted to give a little background. I found myself last Friday in a meeting with the Upper McCollum Watershed Authority and mentioned to them that we'd received something from East Bay Municipal Utility District that wasn't really definitive and asked what their intent was. This appears to be their response, and I'd be interested in what staff makes of this latest exchange. Does it, the staff report says that you feel that there's adequate water and a secured water supply, and I wonder how you reconcile these documents with that conclusion. Does it change in any way your thoughts and recommendations to us?
Well, having just received these yesterday, and seeing that there are, in fact, there is a continuing debate among professionals as to whether or not there is no debate about whether the water supply is adequate. The debate is whether or not the water supply is attributable to a particular source that may, in fact, be owned by someone or by East Bay Mud. And so I think that our original expectation, our original position was that there is an adequate water supply and that we haven't changed our mind in that regard.
Let me ask it more specifically. Given the requirements under CEQA, do you believe that there has been a fair argument presented with expert opinion, and does that trigger anything beyond a mitigated negative deck? What is your recommendation in relation to that? And that may be a legal question rather than a...
It indeed is a legal question. We've not had a chance to confer with counsel on that matter, but we go back to our original statement that the CTS was the overriding concern for us, and that there was, in fact, a fair argument made that supports a fully environmental impact report. And so if you want to piggyback the water issue on top of that, I would defer to counsel whether or not it rises to the fair argument under CEQA.
That is the question, so I don't know if Janice is in the room and has any opinion. There she is.
I don't think. There she is now. I think that if we're to address the issue, it should be done in a privileged format, in a confidential board memo or in closed session, because it certainly leads directly to a potential for litigation.
Okay. Well, then my question is, what is your recommendation? This is this is information that just came to us today, and I wonder what the format and approach should be for dealing with it.
The board can add a closed session today for this reason, or continue the item. The whole range of options are available, but I don't think we can address this now without. I don't think we're prepared to address it right now.
I have a question along the lines of these letters that were received. Public comments were closed. Can you accept these letters after that period? This is before the board now.
If we're going to have a closed session, actually, I suppose that probably should be part of the discussion.
I can answer that one. Actually, the first letter was received prior to the close of the public hearing. The second letter was received after the close of the public hearing. CEQA requires you to respond to any fair argument of substantial evidence of a significant impact prior to close of the public hearing.
Thank you.
And clarifying, the January 26th letter that we have from East Bay Mud was a simple clarification of an earlier letter they had sent prior to the previous meeting.
Any other questions?
And what about the one from Wallace Community Service District then, commenting on the clarifications?
They provided input at the previous meeting, testimony in the previous meeting regarding that earlier letter, so we have the point-counterpoint continuing.
But the fundamental reality is that we do not, the availability and the quantity of water is not an issue. And everybody acknowledges that should not stand in the way of approving this. That alone should not stand in the way of approving the mitigated negative deck.
Our position has been that the quantity of water is no longer an issue.
All right, thank you.
Yes, but you haven't resolved the ownership issue of the water. or if it is coming from Lake Comanche, how is it coming from Lake Comanche? In other words, at what level of Lake Comanche does the water source dry up? Is it coming from the very bottom? Is it coming from, a third of the way down? So if it becomes more than a third empty, the water source dries up. I mean, if you're talking leakage, you better figure out where the heck the source of the, what the elevation of the leak is in Lake Comanche, or you don't really know, how secure that water source is, regardless of the argument of who owns it and is it really surface water, and you need to get an appropriated right for it or not. It seems to me there's a lot of issues around the water. I don't think we can just say, because one of the findings under CEQA is that you have, I think, is a minimum of 20-year, source of water. And just because there's water there right now doesn't mean you have a secure source of water for 20 years. And quite frankly, I don't know why it's a 20-year limit when you have a 30-year loan from the house. And, most houses last more than 20 years. So, it seems to me you want to be pretty, I would just think it's good public policy. We would want to be very secure on that water source. And I guess the other issue I have, and I don't know how it's been investigated, is that, we're talking lots of units here. And it seems to me it should be on surface appropriated water. And, CCWD is looking at trying to introduce some surface appropriated water delivery in the area. And the more houses we build on wells and septics, the harder it's going to be. In other words, why not take the size and scope and scale of this project and take all that money and put it towards the delivery of an actual appropriated surface water system as delivered by CCWD, rather than just continuing with several hundred units and have it all be on wells and septic.
Well, the application before you, heard by the Planning Commission, originally heard by your board, does not provide for that. And the applicant has not indicated a desire to change their application.
Okay.
Any further questions, Supervisor Walensky?
I guess just one. Given all the discussion of water, do you think a statement that there is an adequate water supply at this time is sufficient to approve the project?
Well, that's a question that I can't answer. That's a policy question. We have a history of accepting will serve letters without requiring all of the different agencies to give us the level of scientific evidence of the adequacy of the water supply over time that you're thinking we should on this one. So we have you have a policy issue before you. Are you in fact going to honor will serve letters? Are you going to establish a different criteria for will serve letters? Are you going to require, and that's for all of the water agencies, not just the Wallace Lake Community Services District, because they're small. So if you're going to treat them in one way, you're going to have to treat everyone else. And I would suggest that you would require them to aggregate and accumulate every single will serve letter they ever issue, so that it's not just who comes in first, that they in fact accumulate the totality of all the will serve letters and say, yes, we can guarantee delivery of water over that. But that isn't what we require of our water districts. We get a will serve letter, they say, yes, indeed, we can serve that. And that depends. There's always that little qualifier that they don't put on paper. That depends who comes in first. If the one at the end of the line comes in before the first one comes in, well, they get water. If they don't, well, maybe not. So, that's the nature of will serve letters, and that becomes problematic with consistency with your general plan. And how are you, in fact, enforcing these entities to be able to provide over the long term? At least from the supplies and the entitlements that they know they have now. You can't guarantee over the long run that those those supplies will always be there. At least with the best evidence that we have today, with the hydrogeology reports that we get, we're at least satisfied that we have no reason to disbelieve their statement that they can provide.
That's it for me. Any other questions?
Yes, I do.
Do each of those green tabs indicate a question?
No, just study.
Uh-oh.
I want to go to Sugarfoot. Okay, I'll go to the California tiger salamander, which when this project started and where it is now, there are there's differences because the tiger salamander is shown to be on the site. When I go to the August 15 letter from the Department of Interior, they state that the applicant is proposing to include 74 acres of on-site preserve for the salamander, an additional 125 acres off-site, which is located directly south of the proposed project site. So is this something that the applicant has agreed to? There was a change in the one of the mitigations. I'm not sure if it was 2.3 or 2.13. If it's a 3-to-1 or 1-to-1. And so I guess I'd like clarification on that, because there seems to be some changes, and I'm not clear what is being accepted. I read that, but I'm going back to what this is. I guess I'm just not clear, John.
The project under review at the time that you received the letter in August of 2007 was a 1-to-1 mitigation.
I thought I read somewhere that there could possibly be a 3-to-1. Should it be a 3-to-1 at the 125 acres off-site? Who owns that land?
Well, there was a proposal for a 3-to-1, and I'm not entirely sure what happened. My understanding was that that isn't what went forward. It was a 1-to-1.
It was what?
It was a 1-to-1.
So that's what's in the mitigation, is a 1-to-1.
Right.
Is that sufficient?
Well, according to Fish and Wildlife, they're not satisfied with the mitigation for tiger salamander at all, if you look at that letter.
Okay.
But the applicant would be charged at the end of this process, before they could get a final map approved, they would be charged with the responsibility of satisfying whatever Fish and Wildlife requirements are. I mean, they don't have to be stated with absolute certainty here today.
Well, we've had a fair amount of discussion with our county council, and if I'm wrong, maybe Janice will correct me, but it seems to me that the problem is that there hasn't been an opportunity for the mitigation to be commented on by the public, and with Fish and Wildlife already saying that it wasn't adequate, in a gross way, that the project could change substantially after we've approved the map, in which case we've already lost our opportunity for public review of that.
Mitigations that are being brought forward have to provide some information about the actual mitigation itself, what's being proposed, how it's going to happen, where it's going to take place on the property. And when you defer, or when you say, go get a permit from the agencies, that doesn't satisfy that. It doesn't explain what the potential mitigation is, how it's going to impact the project.
So then it comes, how can we approve this tentative map with that hanging out there?
So our recommendation was been that the environmental impact report specific to that would be prepared, and that the mitigated negative declaration as an instrument was inadequate for that purpose.
Okay.
That was our staff's recommendation.
I mean, that position for the board should hold true for every project. If there is, whether it's a Caltrans or a Fish and Game or what have you, because they can significantly or modify a project. Okay, so now I want to ask on the Wallace Community Service District. I'm still not clear. On their comments, they have stated that they need this project to improve their system. To me, unless they can say something to me that I don't understand, they need to explain why should we be approving a project so they can approve their system, so they can put wells on Unit 2, so they can have the funds to expand or replace infrastructure. I'm not clear, but I don't know why we should be approving a project. So I guess that's another red flag out there for me, because I read their correspondence and I'm just not clear. And I listened to their testimony when they were on board, and I was not clear on that either. So, I mean, if somebody from CSD, the Wallace Community Service District, is here, I'd like the chair's permission to have them address those concerns, unless staff can do that.
We're not as prepared to address that as the district would be. They've articulated that in the previous public hearing as well as writing, but I think that it would be better to address that than staff.
Okay, is somebody here from the Community Services District that can address Supervisor Callaway's concerns? Mr. Cantoni?
Good morning. Charles Cantoni, member of the Board of Directors, Wallace Community Services District. Supervisor, you raised the question about the chicken and the egg, really, of the facilities versus this development and so on. The Wallace Lake Estates development was originally laid out, as you know, in two phases, Unit 1 and Unit 2. And the utilities were split to match those two phases. So we have enough wells in place for Unit 1, and we have a sewer plant that's in place that supports Unit 1. When the developer wants to move forward with Unit 2, then both facilities need to be expanded to support that. And when those expansions take place, then 1 and 2 are adequately served. It gets a little bit complicated in two areas. The first area is, the first question you have to ask, which we've been continuously asked by LAFCO, other people, is can we operate the district with 100 units, which is what Unit 1 is. As we go over the budgeting and the financial plans and so on, we've successfully operated the district on Unit 1 with the revenues that come from the rates and from a special assessment on each lot of $500 a year. That takes care of the operational needs. However, the more we look at the road situation, we recognize that those roads cannot be maintained with the amount of money that's coming in. It's too small a budget. Our budget is about $250,000 a year. We've not been able to build reserves to keep the road repairs up to the level that's needed. So as the statement I made at the last meeting was that operationally we know how to survive, but those roads are wearing. We have alligator cracking. We did one repair 2 years ago, a very small section, cost $25,000, just way out of proportion, and it's worse now with the price of oil. So we have a long-term problem, which gets helped greatly by enlarging the size of the area that we serve. So that's one point. And that we can survive operationally. It looks like we run a risk on the roads. We also run a risk on the sewer plant if any major catastrophe takes place and something major has to be replaced. The reserves are not that high. It's an issue of reserves and the size of the district. The other aspect to what's going on here is that when we negotiated the will serve agreement with the developer, we wanted to not have incremental capability be too small. And in other words, we don't want each developer to add 10% and then 15 and then 20%. It drives you crazy on your facilities. You need to take a meaningful step with the facility's capacity. And in the will serve agreement with this developer, he has agreed to double the capacity of the sewer plant, for example. We now serve 100 people. We have a capacity to serve close to 200 people. They've agreed to give us the capability to have 400 unit capacity. Now, the reason for that is that there are other pieces of Unit 1 which have not yet been developed. There's Lot 106B out front, which is close to a final map now, which is 26 residential units and then a commercial area where they want to put in higher density housing and another 25 units. There's Lot 24, which is zoned, I commercial, and the builder there, or the owner, wants to put in another 25 units. And that's in Unit 1. So we need this. In order to support all that, it makes sense to get this additional capacity. Excuse me, and that's why we negotiated with the developer to make a meaningful step to get it up to a capacity of 400. So this development, he only needs really 124 units. He's willing to really put the money up to get the capacity up to 400.
Can I ask you questions?
Yes, go ahead.
The wells that you have in Unit 1 are enough to service Unit 1, correct? And Unit 1 has 100 total parcels or houses already there?
We have approximately 100 customers right now at maximum build out when all vacant lots are filled.
In Unit 1?
In Unit 1, it goes to 112 residential lots.
Okay.
Then Lot 106B is another roughly 50 connections, and Lot 24 is another 25 connections. So it's another 75 on top of that, so that's close to 190 in Unit 1, full out.
And then 124 for Unit 2.
Right.
So the commercial is on top of that, correct?
Yes, the downtown area is on top of that.
The downtown, is that where the post office is? The downtown is where the post office and the storage area?
The store, the gas station, and so on, yes. The restaurants.
And the convention center.
Yes, and the convention center, right. It's very difficult. You appreciate it's very difficult to answer the question about the viability of the district with the current 100 units. As I told you last time, I have experience in running small companies that run out of cash. We can make this thing last, but we're vulnerable. It's extremely risky. And every class I've gone to since I learned about water and sewer in the last 3 years tells me you need to be conservative. You need to expect something major is going to fail, and you need to build your reserves up. And the district, before I got there, wisely put in rate increases, substantial rate increases. They've been going up 5% a year. We have to decide in April this year if we're going to go up another 5%. And we're up now, and the residents are groaning that, we're up to our base rate is $110 a month for water and sewer. But again, the classes I go to say you've got to set the rates to cover the costs, and you have to build reserves.
Is that water, sewer, and roads?
No, the 110 a month is just water and sewer. The roads are essentially covered by the special assessment, which is another $500 a year.
Have you done, I'm just curious, have you done any projections to speculate where those rates would go with an expanded facility?
If this project goes through and you have to go out far enough to where they look at the number of customers, and let's say the number of customers goes from 100 to 200, and we're talking in today's dollars, leaving inflation out of it, my estimate is, looking at the books, that if we double, that's essentially doubling the number of customers, we could probably reduce the water and sewer rates by somewhere in the 30% region, if you look at it. Because with our costs in this situation, and those two plants, are largely fixed costs. They're not variable costs. So when you double the amount of water you're producing, and you look at how much electricity is that going to cost and how much chemicals to process it, it's minor compared to all the other costs, the maintenance costs and everything else, which are kind of fixed. They're there whether you have 100 customers or 200 customers. So theoretically, you could probably lower rates with larger income. Now, I've got to be careful with that. You don't know about inflation, and you don't know about the level of reserves and so on. But certainly, the district right now is small for what it needs to do. We have one employee taking care of everything, maintenance, operations, and everything else, and a lot of volunteer work going on.
Supervisor, yes.
This sewer system that he's talking about is unique in the fact that each home has its own septic tank. And the plant that he's talking about just treats the effluent, not solid waste. So the solid waste are kept in the septic at each residence, and it's up to them to have them pumped.
That's right.
At their cost. And then the effluent, instead of leach lines, the effluent goes down to the treatment plant, and it's then treated and sent up to the pond.
Right.
So it is unique.
Okay, Supervisor Walensky.
This is a completely different sort of question, but since you're up here, I thought I'd give it a try. Obviously, the size of this agency puts it into a precarious position based on the need for infrastructure and the maintenance of it. And you seem to be betting the farm on the build-out that's could happen under the circumstance. I'm wondering whether you've been keeping track of the news articles and this particular developer, Uranus and Bartis. I've got an article here that says it's $972.5 million of debt going into Chapter 11, or at least after the banks weighed in on the subject. Do you see this as likely to be built by this particular developer under the circumstances? What's the analysis of the district in relation to what it's relying on to bring this home?
I can only comment from what I read, mostly from the papers. I haven't talked extensively to John Ryan. I haven't talked to John Ryan at all about it. But it appears to me that from everything that I read, that Ryan and Bartis Communities, which is the corporation, which did all the planning and does all the building and so on, is not in Chapter 11. They're functional, they're operational. The two owners that own most of Ryan and Bartis, John Ryan and Mr. Bartis, are both in bankruptcy because they apparently guaranteed the debt of lands that were purchased in order to build more developments. And the banks closed in on them when the housing boom failed. So they've got what I like to call, since I'm familiar with the process, unfortunately, bankruptcy protection against the banks who want to try to collect that. Seems to be independent of the Ryan and Bartis Communities as a corporation, and they're the ones that are carrying this process forward. We have, for example, an activity going on that was required in the last extension we did on the will serve letter, that they deed over the the land that the wells are on and the water treatment plant's on, and the other half of our lake and dam. All that land is owned by Ryan and Martis, not by the Community Services District. And we required them to deed that over. They are proceeding with that. They're paying for the survey work. The survey work is done. The pins have been driven. And we're in the process then of hopefully being able to get that transferred over. So from the viewpoint of the district, Ryan and Martis Communities is a functional organization. I think it's only speculation as to what they will do with the land, if they get a tentative map or don't get a tentative map. I saw an article in the middle of January that said there's a Canadian corporation that just purchased a number of lots in, I think, Natomas. I'm not sure where that is. It's in California. Some 65 lots. And they've set up an operation called Granite that's going to sell those lots and so on. And that doesn't surprise me in a bankruptcy situation like that, where the judge wants to see assets liquidated to pay the debt. That makes a lot of sense. And that's what I see going on. So if you ask me to speculate what's going to happen here, I would assume that they'll either have, the corporation looks like it has the staying power that if the market returns, they'll eventually build homes. Another possibility is they may sell this. It is an asset. It is an asset of John Ryan.
Thanks.
As we understand it.
Any other further questions? Supervisor Toffenelli? No. On the issue of financial wherewithal, once the tentative map, if it could possibly be approved, then that creates value that might be acquired by some more formidable developer at some future time. So in my mind, it's not totally acceptable to decline to approve this on the basis of any particular person's financial wherewithal.
The only reason for my questioning had to do with the security of the water supply and how, and the timing of this. If we've got an agency that's on the brink of deeper financial challenge, and we've got a process that may work through over a longer period of time, given what's before us, that weighs in on. I keep asking questions about water, and this is only one piece of it, but it, to me, all connects to an issue that I want to have resolved before the end of this. It helps inform my vote.
Yeah,
so thank you for.
I should point out that we have 3 wells on the land that we're talking about. They're all 3 of them are located on this quote remainder parcel. They're not located on any land that we own right now. There was another map that was granted, tentative map, and I think final map on McCullamy Oaks, which is a 40-unit subdivision nearby. The 4th well is there. That's a good well, good quality water, and apparently good production capability. And there's, across Highway 12, there's a well in place, which we got information on about a year ago, that used to supply the pond for the lumber mill there. And that's a very good well, better than, I think, in capacity, better than any of the wells that we own right now. So in the area, and these wells, as near as we can tell from the monitoring we're doing in conjunction with CCWD, don't interact with each other. When we run well 2 and we run well 3, we don't see one affecting the other. They seem to be able to. We are operating them both right now, for example, because we're testing well 3 to prove that we can treat the water correctly. And they're not interacting with each other if one well is pulling down so the other one won't produce. The other 2 wells, the McCullamy Oaks well is a great distance away. We've seen no sign of interaction on that because we have a monitoring device in that well right now, have had for about a year. And then the other one across the street on Highway 12, if that were made accessible to us, I'm sure that one is also distance-wise well separated. So that we see a lot of engineering analysis on is the water available or not. If you add up the capacity of all those wells, you have water to supply 400 units without any problem with redundancy. I'm an engineer by background, and so I'm highly confident the water is there. and I'm highly confident, my lawyer tells me we are not stealing water from Comanche. And I would like to clarify in the response to that the subject switched from stealing water from their water rights to they can't guarantee that they'll always have water in the lake so that we can continue to have it. Not steal it, but have it. Our hydrogeologist I talked to, Ken Lloyd, who's very familiar with the project here, points out that the McCullum River and the aquifer were in existence, I said forever in the letter, which is a stretch, but for a long period of time, eons, and well before Comanche Lake ever got put in. And percolating aquifers, which is what we're on, are generally fed by perennial rivers, rivers that flow year after year. So if they were to line Comanche Reservoir, I suppose that could shut off the water. It's 7,000 acres of plastic to shut the water off from us. Or they could remove the dam. If they remove the dam, McClury River is still going to flow, and the aquifer recharge is still going to take place. With the point of a 20-year water supply, I would ask you, does East Bay Mud have a guaranteed 20-year water supply for the residents in the East Bay? And when you try to answer that, you're going to have to convince me that the Pardee Reservoir will continue to exist and fill every year for 20 years. And I don't think that the answer to that question is any different than is our aquifer going to get filled from its recharge. If we go into a desert cycle with absolutely no water, no one has a 20-year supply.
That's a very good point, and I guess we'll have to weigh that in on the rest of us.
Chuck, I have a question to clarify something Supervisor Walensky, a comment he said. He mentioned that Wallace Community Service District was on the brink. Is it on the brink? If this does not go through here today?
No, it is not on the brink. We are, in the last year, the rate increase we had and the way we've managed our expenses, we increased our repair and maintenance reserves by about $30,000 last year, and we're doing the same this year. So this is a reserve that was at zero before, so there's a good reason why we're doing this. But we're actually building reserves in that area. We have spent reserves in another area, and that we had to do a $250,000 design modification to the sewer plant, and we did that through a loan, or partially through a loan.
Partially through a loan.
Yeah, we borrowed $150,000 from the CSDA, 15-year payback on that. No, the district is operationally, I don't believe, from my experience in running companies, it's not in danger of collapse. But the frustration over the roads and the deterioration of the roads over time are going to be a serious problem. And that's where, see, there's such huge leverage. If you have, we have revenue now from the property tax of about $70,000 a year. If we just double the number of customers, that goes to close to $150,000 a year. And now that's a meaningful amount of money that can be spent on road repair. That's why we always say that the district fundamentally is there to serve. You decide who's going to develop, and we're there to serve. And it's up to us to make sure we can do that. Why are we standing up here saying, well, we're in favor of this development? From the financial viewpoint, as small as we are, it's difficult and it's risky. And it's risky from the standpoint of the long-term prospect.
One other question. You mentioned there was 76 lots that remain to be built out.
There are 12 quarter-acre lots in the subdivision that remain to be built, roughly. And then but out front, in Lot 106B, which is zoned commercially, they have plans for 26 and 25, so that's 51 there.
51 commercial lots?
Well, they want to put in, their plan shows small lot, what I call small, less than quarter-acre houses, 26 houses. Okay. And then an area along Comanche Parkway South, which is 4 lots that would support duplexes, I think. They're townhouses they're talking about. They're talking about another 20 or 25 units there. And then there's lot 24, which is 2.5 acres, and that builder, he's a builder, would like to put in another 25 or 30 townhouses there.
When I was there Saturday, there was some clearing going on. Was that some lots that were being...
Yeah, in this 12 remaining quarter-acre, roughly, lots, Sterling Builders of San Ramon, of Pleasanton, is building 4 lots there. That's been through the county, all approved, and they're in the process of putting the improvements in right now under a will serve agreement.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question about relative productive capability of your wells compared to some of the others in the area. I know that it's in the hydrology report, but you've got 4 wells that are available, but you're primarily using 1. What is the gallons per hour on that?
The one that we're using runs at roughly 140 to 145 gallons per minute.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm talking gallons per minute.
Yeah, gallons per minute, right.
Yeah.
I don't have this totally ingrained in my head, but I remember several years ago being very surprised that the Valley Springs, their whole municipal water district is also dependent upon 1 well, and I think that I remember it's like between 30 and 40 gallons a minute. And
no, it's much higher.
It is much higher?
Our wells, relatively speaking, are fairly low production. When you say 150 to 200 gallons per minute, the Valley Springs, I don't know if anybody's here that has that number, but if it's a single well for that population, it's much higher.
I remember being shocked at what the low volume of that production was. And the point that I'm making is that they're serving at least 10 times more households than you are currently serving. So that's just informational purposes only.
I can give you a measure of that, and that is what standards do we use of expected water use per lot or per home per day. And we expect about 520 gallons per day for each user. CCWD uses a very similar number. I'm not familiar with Valley Springs exactly what their number is, and you have to accommodate peak flows that are in the order of 3 times that for the summertime.
Including a component of fire flows.
Yeah, including the need for the fire flows.
Okay. And that's why you have that huge water tank on the hill.
Well, we have the water tank on the ground and 3 pumps that deliver fire flows of 1,500 gallons per minute during a fire, and a backup generator.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Cantoni? Did you get your questions answered to Supervisor Callaway?
I appreciate it, Mr. Cantoni. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Order. Now that Mr. Cantoni has spoken on this issue, does that not create a circumstance where some of these people who are here who would like to speak like Steve Elias should have that opportunity? Thank you.
I opened it up for Mr. Cantoni because he has expert testimony relative to the specific question that Supervisor Callaway was asking. It was not in any way bringing up anything new or different than we talked about before. Okay.
Point of order again.
I'll hear your comment.
Thank you. All the minutes that you spoke, there are some rebuttal answers to that because there are some very fudgy comments in that report. And as ratepayers for that district, I think it's only fair that we have a chance as long as Steve Elias to make some comments, not as we open it up again.
May I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Historically, the board, once it closes the public hearing, allows the board members in their discussion to specifically ask individuals to come forward and answer questions. And that historically has worked very well. So if a board member has a question to ask or for a clarification, the board member has the ability to do so. That does not, and it never has historically anyway, opened up the public hearing to anything other than a board member directly asking someone to come forward and answer a question. So, and otherwise we're not going to be able to allow board members to ask questions, and I don't think we want to go there.
I am very much sensitive to the public's need to comment. We've gone through many public hearings on this thing, and I said at the onset that the public hearing is closed. We allowed Mr. Cantoni to respond as much the same as Supervisor Tryon is pointing out. I apologize if you feel like that you're not being given a chance, but the public hearing is closed. Sorry. All right. Any other questions or comments? How about a motion?
Before you make a motion, I just want to clarify behind the record.
Certainly.
I just want to note for you that mitigation measure number 13, which is on page 20 of 22 of the resolution, the mitigation measure actually states that the applicant shall preserve a minimum of 1 acre of similar undisturbed habitat for each acre of disturbed habitat lost due to project implementation. That's the minimum level. If the regulatory agency requires more, then they'll have to comply with the regulatory agency. The board has the ability to also, if you prefer, add into that. But I think the record already indicates, based on other conditions, that they will have to comply with whatever the regulatory agency wants for off-site habitat restoration. Just to supplement Maria's comment.
And there's been previous testimony to the fact that if the offsite or if those mitigation measures require a sufficient modification of the plan, then that would not be in substantial conformance to the tentative map. So they'd have to start the whole process over again. Is that reasonably correct?
That's true. If the regulatory agency requires them to redo the location of the project, then the staff could not make a finding of substantial conformance on the final map. And that would be a final decision by staff. That's always appealable up through the Planning Commission and the board. And ultimately, either the applicant will agree with staff and start over, or it'll come up to the board on an appeal process.
Okay, thank you.
And for the record, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to point out that the resolution before you, if you choose to adopt a resolution in favor of the applicant, it identifies the applicant as Pinnacle Land Ventures, LLC, whereas we've advertised all along as John D. Rainin, LLC. Pinnacle is the successor company to Rainin. So just for the record, if somebody sees that, they know what it is.
Okay, so noted.
I would like to make a motion, but at first I want to make just a quick comment here. I toured last Saturday. I think we all got an email for an invitation to go out and tour, and I don't know if anybody else did, but I went out Saturday. And I went through so I could familiarize myself with this project and the water system and the sewage treatment plant and the whole development as a whole and where it was going, so I could get a picture as to, in my mind, what was going on. I toured some of the houses that public comment had with this developer, and I actually walked through some of the houses that were built, and I'll tell you, I was impressed with the houses. I did not see any cracks on any slabs. I did not see anything falling down a hill. I did not see the walls, any cracks on any of the walls or any of the ceilings. I was told there were some issues on some decks that the developer fixed, and I was quite impressed. I think this development is a good development. I think albeit it's being served by groundwater at this time, and it is an infrastructure project where it will be served by water and sewer service, and I'm in favor of this project. And I would make the motion or I would move to approve this project with the resolution that's before us.
That's under the alternatives. You're moving option 3?
Yes.
Do we have a second? On January 6th, I departed from established protocol here, in using a ruling that I had heard about in CSAC training, that the chairman has the prerogative of both making motions and seconding motions. In view of that, I will second Supervisor Toffanelli's motion so we can get a vote. Okay.
Wait a minute. I think we need to poll the board on that, because in my 24 years here, that has not been acceptable. The board has always said that the chair would not make motions and would not second motions, and one of them, quite frankly, is just a checks and balance on the board, so that the chair does not obtain sort of, as that position, undue influence. So if we're going to change at least 24 years of history, and I think it probably goes back much longer than that, I think we need to have a polling of the board and not just a unilateral decision.
Are you challenging the chair's ruling on this?
Yes, because that is I don't know that it's never been done, but that is not the historically how the county is operating. And if we're going to start changing, the authority of the chair, then I think we need to have a discussion of that, and we need to have a polling of the board.
So this is another instance of we don't do that here. So we don't do those things here.
The reason I asked the question is I think, and I'd ask counsel for advice on this. This is a policy issue that's come up. It would appear to require a vote of the board to change or to affirm policy in either event, because we haven't really talked about this ever. The question I have is, can that be done through a poll, or must we agendize this?
No, this is
to create a policy.
Just a parliamentary issue. You can decide this right now. I would point out that under the Roberts rules, which we discussed earlier, weren't adopted, there is a procedure under the old-fashioned Roberts rules, and it's a procedure that allows the board chair to step down from the chair temporarily in order to make motions and to participate. So that's also an option. But I think that requirement was removed from the Roberts rules. This board doesn't have a rule on this issue, so I think you'll need to clarify it right now. Does that answer your question?
This board is not.
The question I had was, to take something to that level of policy, do we need to announce that prior to the meeting in order to be able to actually pass a resolution, or does this come under that radar? This has been an issue much discussed in previous issues. The question is, are we crossing a threshold here or not, and what's your recommendation?
My recommendation is a parliamentary question that the board can resolve.
All right.
It's not a public issue, public comment issue.
All right.
Okay. I don't want to die on this hill. So I will remove my second, and it seems like that, unfortunately, Mr. Toffanelli, your motion has died for the lack of a second. Since I'm foreclosed from making motions, I will ask somebody else to make a motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion for the resolution denying the mitigated negative declaration for the project and the zoning amendment and subdivision tract map for Wallace Lake Estates. I do that. That's the motion. And the reason is oh my gosh.
I'd like to make a request, Janice Silly. Could you just have staff read the motion and the findings based on that motion? As we normally do, that would be much preferable to me.
I can do that.
And that would be for any way the board wants to go. Please have staff make the motion and base the findings on that motion.
Okay. Thank you. I want to comment. I'm empathetic with the developer. This has been going on way too long, and we can do a lot of finger pointing. But this is where we are today, and I understand the concerns of the Wallace Community Service District. But I feel like this is in the best interest of the county at the moment. And staff, could you please do what council asked you to do?
Do you want us to read the entire document or just the introduction plus the findings?
The introduction and the findings.
The resolution denying the mitigated negative declaration for project 2003-114, zoning amendment and tentative subdivision tract map for Wallace Lake Estates Unit Number 2. Findings for 2003-114 TSTM. 1. An initial study mitigated negative declaration was prepared for project 2003-114 in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, and significant new information was presented subsequent to the completion of the initial study mitigated negative declaration. 2. There's substantial evidence of a fair argument that the project as proposed will have a significant impact on the California tiger salamander. The evidence is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has stated in a letter to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dated July 27, 2007, that the mitigations for impacts to California tiger salamander are inadequate and would not reduce those impacts to a less than significant level.
And I would just ask that if the board wants to supplement any of those findings on any other issues, please direct staff to prepare findings for that, which we can do right now.
Well, Janice, if an EIR is required, then they go back to sort of point one and take a look at
my question is
it's not just based on those findings.
My question is that the only issue upon which the board's making its findings of a fair argument of a significant impact?
And is this a directed EIR or a broad-based?
Well, that would be for staff to determine. I just want to know all the reasons upon which you're basing your motion, because I heard staff discussion that there were other issues that the board was concerned about.
Yes.
And I can help you with that if that's how you want to amend your motion. Or
there is, but I guess we need a second to continue the discussion.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion, but would like to weigh in on an issue.
Go ahead on your comments. A second is acknowledged.
On the question of water, we had a peer review that suggested that there be further study. And with all due regard to the tiger salamander, for me, this is a human environment issue that really needs to be addressed in a more certain way than the peer review left, which was saying there are certain things we can't answer and it would require deeper further study. For me, this hinges on that question, and I would like, certainly if we're going to do a directed EIR relating to habitat and tiger and endangered species stuff, I would hope that we'd also do as recommended. Somehow that we have a truncated, in my view, sort of a process regarding our analysis of the water situation, which I believe needs to be done for the whole area down there the question of surface water, the question of what is coming out of the lake, what's regular aquifer, and what is somehow coming in through leakage. What constitutes? We have two radically different views presented. One by the local district, and the other by East Bay Municipal Utility District. Of course, they have separate interests, but reconciling that is important to me, and I would imagine should be extremely important to both the district and the people who are reliant upon its water. So I would ask staff to prepare some language, if it's not already in here. I've seen lots of different iterations, but have not seen the recent one relating to the issues brought up by East Bay in their first letter. What is our response to that, and could we include that, and would the maker of the motion consider completion of the water study as part of this process?
Yes.
In that case, my second is no longer a question of
all right.
discussion.
I would suggest that the motion be amended as follows, and that would be in addition to the findings already read, there would be an additional finding that states there's substantial evidence of a fair argument that the project to propose will have significant impact to water availability, and the evidence would be, and I don't have the letters with me, can you cite the dates of the two East Bay mud letters?
January 5th and January 26th.
Yeah, we have January 5th.
Thank you. That would be based on the two letters submitted by East Bay Mud, is what I'm hearing the board saying.
Okay.
That's my main concern, is the water. The last thing I want is to build a whole bunch more homes and then find out that the water source isn't going to go away. That it's actually surface water, or the leakage source can be stopped, or what have you. I think there needs to be some negotiations on the water. In addition, we had just in the public testimony here this morning the fact that the roads are inadequate. We can't maintain the roads to an adequate standard in Unit 1. I don't know what you have in Unit 2, but it seems to me that's pretty critical that we have a funding source that's adequate for the infrastructure. So if we're going to do the same thing as Unit 1, then it strikes me as we don't have a funding source that's adequate, at least for the road infrastructure. Secondly, in the public discourse this morning, it was brought out that this is the sewer system's a step system. It's not a true sewer system. It's only for the effluent. It's not for the solids. We put one of those in my district with community development block grant funds for low income, and that was in the Fallecito area, and CCWD pumps them and does all this, and the effluent goes up Douglas Flat. But I've never found that to be a very acceptable, and I don't think most of the people really are very happy with that as a sewer system. And I think one of the things needs to be looked at, and we had a water forum at LAFCO last night. Russ was in attendance. Right now, we have no ability to take the solids in this county and process them. Some people are going as far away as Pleasanton to dispose of the solids. So what are the implications, in my opinion, of all that? And should we be looking at a true sewer system rather than what I refer to as a step sewer system? So I think there's quite a few questions concerning this project that need to be analyzed before we just build another 200 or 300 or 400 homes under the model that we're currently dealing with. And I'm not so sure that model's a good model.
Supervisor Walensky.
I'd like to add to my previous, I seconded the motion and clarified the nature of that, but I also wanted to add one other piece of this, which is that given the evolution of, and without detailed comment on how this is a very old application, and we've certainly been hither and yon about it, but I'm wondering whether there's another aspect that could be attached to this, which is that given the length of time in our internal process and given the targeted nature of our reservations and inquiry here, our desire to gain more information, can we do this on an expedited basis? Are there mechanisms that we could include in this to allow for a timely process? Is there anything that can be attached to this that would make this a priority for concluding these two questions?
First of all, we have not gotten affirmation from the applicant that they are in fact willing to go with this environmental impact report, and that would have been second part of our resolution that we failed to read into the record, which would have been if the Board of Supervisors directs the applicant to prepare an environmental impact report for the project, further direct staff to prepare a resolution recommending denial of the project for action at I would recommend February 17th board meeting if the applicant declines to prepare an environmental impact report. So if they agree to preparing an impact report and we don't come back for denial, then it is putting it on as fast a track as we possibly can, and the best way to do that would be to get a reliable third-party consultant to help us with that.
Okay, so that I understand what we're proposing here today is that the motion is to deny this document and require that the applicant come back with a focused EIR based on water only.
No, water and CTS.
Two questions.
CTS.
Well, I think as you get into the investigative process, maybe other issues will arise. I don't think that precludes other issues that arise in the investigative process.
Well, the initial study didn't bring up any other issues related to this project that could not have been satisfied through the project mitigations. So at this point, we would be only recommending a focused environmental review of the CTS, California Tiger Salamander, and the water.
Well, I think you should also look at the sewer system, and I think you should look to make sure that roads, we have an ability to adequately maintain roads. I mean, I would like to see the roads go into an RTP and have them be in the county maintained system, but privately funded.
This is a CSD road. So
What?
This is a CSD road.
Okay, so we don't have the authority to do that. But the big thing to me on these developments, and this isn't sort of a low-income community development block grant development, is you need to have adequate sewer, adequate water, and adequate roads. And I think there's a question as to the adequacy of all three. So I think the other two need to be looked at also, is you're going to be hauling this septage down to Pleasanton or wherever you're going to go, and what is the, we've had trouble before in negotiations trying to find a home to take the septage. And we were cut off by Sacramento at one time when we were going there. We do not have a facility in county, although last night CCWD brought up the potential of having a facility, but that's strictly potential. I mean, wouldn't we want to know that we have a definitive home for all the stuff that's going to be pumped if we're going to be approving of the project and where that home is?
Tom, this is its own service district. We have no control over where they pump it, what they do with it, or whatever. That's if they choose to pump it
for a project.
Yeah, but if they choose to pump it to the Bay Area, that's where they choose to pump it, and they pay for it. We're getting into a service district here and trying to tell them how to operate.
I see that I agree that that's a gray area, but we build these subdivisions, and then the problem comes after they're built, and it comes back on our lap. That's where it comes. I mean, they all show up here and want the county to do something about it. Anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we have clarification on the question. I want to give my apologies, personal apologies, to the applicant. I mean, this is really quite mind-boggling to me that this board has given lip service to the idea about being proactive. Want to build an economic vitality in this county. We have a project that was approved in 1987 that should have been built out, but because somebody died, it didn't. We've got issues brought up about the peer review on the water. We had a person that probably has a PhD in hydrology tell us last session that the test that is being requested by this peer review would be inconclusive at best. You cannot, under these particular circumstances, prove the volume of intermixing of the waters that this project has been pumping. I think that I also recall testimony about the fact that prior to the creation of that reservoir, that the water or the wells in this area were sufficiently productive. So I think that it's a smokescreen. And in my view, the objections based on that the availability of the water is a smokescreen, and I apologize for what's happening here. Anyway, on...
Can I speak just briefly? Let me explain.
Mr. Cantoni, I'm going to have to be consistent in my imposing of the rules here. Sorry.
Board members have a right to question.
Okay, the point that we find ourselves in now is we have a motion and a second. We had clarifications read into the record. So on the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No.
No. We have, okay. Supervisor Toffanelli's training wheels just fell off. Excuse me, Gary. Anyway, the motion prevails on a 3-2. So that motion is carried.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
A moment of personal privilege. We had a letter come in from a person who frequents our meetings, and it outlined his concern that there were people with disabilities that we sometimes took through lunch hour, people with diabetes, people who had things they needed to deal with, and asked that we find a way to plan ahead so that we don't take people all the way through lunch hour. I'd like to find out, because I know there are a lot of people here for the next discussion, I'd like to find out how long that might take place and whether we might at least take some small break to allow for those people who have that circumstance. It wouldn't have to be a long break, but they ask for something like 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, let's take a break anyway.
5 minutes.
Okay, Supervisor Walensky brings up the point. The next item on the agenda is the legal access requirements. Can I see a show of hands of people who would want to be making comments on that issue? Okay, just on the 5-minute rule, that's at least a half an hour of potential discussion. Okay. Yes.
Let's take a 5-minute break and go to that, or maybe a 10-minute break in deference.
I could make it real sweet for you, if I may. At the request of members of the committee who've reviewed the item before you, the Director of Public Works, my office, they've asked that they collectively be given a little bit more time because there's concerns about the draft that's in front of you, that while that staff has adequately followed board's direction, there are still some questions about that in terms of interpretation, as well as the clerk of the board is asked to have an opportunity to weigh in on the sample notice that we've got there as an attachment A. So it has been requested by all of those parties that we have a little bit more time to work on this and bring it back to your board.
How much is a little more, John?
2 weeks. Roger Pitto is shaking his head. 2 weeks. That would allow chairman of that committee as well as the other members a chance, along with Public Works and Planning and Building, to weigh in on hammering out one final.
Michael, is 2 weeks enough for Public Works? Okay, it's enough for you, John? I'll move for a 2-week continuance.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, a 2-week continuance on item 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? None.
And we accomplished the no hypoglycemia at the same time. It works out great. Thank you.
I hope you had an exciting morning there.
All right. If we can wait for the gallery to clear, and we'll continue on item 7, review of correspondence, reports, and various matters.
Lunch?
I just
Nice to see you. How much would you expect? I have to go see a doctor.
Supplemental meeting. Okay, calling the meeting back to order, we have item number 7, review of correspondence and reports, various matters of concern. We're starting with Supervisor Tryon.
I'll be leaving tomorrow morning for my RCRC meeting, spending the night because we have our annual dinner down there. I think some of you will be joining me for the dinner anyway, if not the meeting, and I'll be back up here on Thursday. I'm attending a community club meeting as the installation officer in Murphy's tonight, and the chamber dinner on Thursday evening. That's all I have.
Supervisor Walensky.
I have the Child Care Council today, this afternoon. I have a meeting with the Delta College board president and chief, I guess, chancellor or whatever the administrator is, president, at noon on Friday to talk about service to this county. As you know, we were bitterly disappointed when they decided to put they had a cost overrun on Mountain
Ranch.
Mountain Ranch. No, not Mountain Ranch.
Mountain House. Anyway, that
some mountain.
That seemed to mean that we were being a somewhat inappropriate cash cow for services to people in far-off places. I call it taxation without result, and made some presentations along with Supervisor Claudino to that effect about a year ago, and this meeting is a follow-up to that, where I believe they may be rethinking their relationship to us, and I'm hopeful that this will produce some follow-up and some progress on establishing some form of community college services in this county from Delta. So I'll keep you posted on that.
That's a Friday?
Yes, that's Friday.
Is it possible that I can attend that meeting with you?
I can ask. That'd be fine. It's your district, so and Claudino and I were working on this, so that'd be fine. Okay. I'll give them a ring. In fact, why don't we call them right after this meeting? Okay.
That's all. Gary?
On Wednesday, tomorrow, I will be attending the Coscove Creek meeting in Valley Springs at the Vets Hall, 5 p.m. I will also be attending on Thursday night the Chamber's installation dinner at Camps at 5:30. And hopefully on Friday with Steve, I'll be attending that meeting concerning Delta College. That's it for me.
Supervisor Callaway?
Tom, I'll be at the Murphy's Community Club tonight because we're going to be doing the fire talk. Yo, try it. Never mind. I'm going to be at the Murphy's Community Club. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be on the conference call with Ag and Natural Resources with CSAC. One of the issues is proposed changes in the Williamson Act that have been recommended by Yolo County. I gave a copy to Mary Muntz, commented on it. I gave a copy to the Farm Bureau. Tom, I gave you a copy. Did you have a chance to look at it? Okay. And it's just preliminary discussion. Some of the things that are proposed, one is that there would be sort of like an enforcement person for Williamson Act contracts. The position of our Ag Department is we're really not going to be able to keep enough of subvention funds once a contract goes into non-compliance to afford that position. I don't think this board would support that anyway. It was interesting finding out some counties do not have a requirement. Do not have a requirement on a yearly annual income reporting mechanism, which we do. I will be in Sacramento on Thursday for California State Association of Counties Executive Committee meeting. I too will be at the chamber function, assuming I'm back in town in time. On Friday, I am going on a field trip in my district on a legal access issue. So that's...
Good luck.
It doesn't go away. I don't, huh?
Actually in the field?
In the field. I always go in the field. And I will be going to the fundraiser for Chairs for Charity on Saturday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Walensky had another comment.
Yes, on correspondence, I had, and I believe all of you have the letter from Jerry McNerney, the congressperson from down in San Joaquin, among other places, regarding the location of the Veterans Facility, the anticipated Veterans Facility. There is a meeting this Friday at 10:30 in French Camp and a phone number to get the details as to where this will be. I'm hoping that one of us can go, and I'm willing to do that since I'm going to be down in the area for the meeting with Delta. But I was hoping maybe somebody else would be able to attend as well. All right. It seems it's very much in our interest to make sure that it stays as close to us as we can. And French Camp was the site that we all had weighed in on. You may recall when we passed I believe it was either a resolution or at least a determination to communicate that. So to protect our interests and assuming that nobody's changed their mind on the location, we'll go down there and try to make that happen.
Okay, very fine. Okay, I will be going to the RCRC annual dinner on tomorrow night and also attending the leadership, well, actually the chamber installation dinner, which the component of that is the graduation of the Leadership Calaveras 2008 class. Yeah, I've tried everywhere in this county to get a cap and gown and can't find one. So.
I have my daughters from high school.
Okay. On the correspondence side, I think that we would be remiss if we don't acknowledge Jeannie Boyce's the accolades that she got on the front page of the Enterprise about being the best of the best in county government. Boy, that was really a well-deserved recognition. If you're listening, Jeannie, I wish you were here. anyway, that was nicely done and awarded for all the right reasons. She has just done a fantastic job for us. And Marita and I attended there was a meeting on the 23rd. Or was that that was the 22nd, I guess, that meeting with Phil Arkow on the link. So it was only through Jeannie's hard work that seminar came together, where we learned about the connection between abusive people, starting with spouses and ending with dogs, or vice versa. Anyways, it was an eye-opener for me. And that brings up another sort of bit of housekeeping. We anticipated that there would be a $1,000 charge for that. Turns out it's only, I think it's $658 that would cover the airfare for Mr. Arkow. His lodging was taken care of by I don't have that information, but it was one of our Angels Camp purveyors of lodging. They donated that, and his meals were taken care of by people that were actually involved in putting that together. The significant contribution by the women's I don't know, Marita, that facility is called? The Women's Women's Crisis Center. Yeah, I'm sorry about fumbling over that. But it was very well received. We had significant participation by the Sheriff's Department, the DA and Public Defender. Anyway, it was very well done. The final thing in closing the issue is, are we going to fund that? CAO tells me that the department heads don't have the ability to backfill this. Is it okay if we just have it go 1/5 of the 658 from each of our funds?
Well, considering we agreed to do it for $1,000, to me, we've agreed and just have the CAO or Madeline process the bill.
Fine with me.
Okay.
And is a poll or a vote?
Well, just a reaffirmation of the previous decision with new numbers attached to it.
Okay. I want to remind the board and Brian Moss, if he's listening, we have a time clock ticking on our response or our letter for the weighing in on the AB 885 that's coming up. I think it's on the 7th or the 9th that we have a very short window of opportunity to do that. So, Mr. CAO, can you follow up on that?
It's on the agenda.
It's on the
for next week. Okay, all right. Well, I haven't read it yet. So.
Supervisor Thomas,
Yes.
I wanted to go back to one thing you had mentioned, which is it does seem when we have an acknowledgement as grand as the one bestowed upon Jeannie Boyce, that we ought to bring that before this board in some kind of formal way, and I'm wondering whether we might ask that the chair and the CAO arrange for such a moment in the next meeting.
It will require the cooperation of the individual being honored, and knowing that individual and her self-effacement, I don't know if we'll be able to guarantee it, but we will do our darndest.
We'll try.
Last I checked, you were the boss of department heads, so I would suggest you exercise that authority.
She shall be dragoon, sir. She shall be dragoon.
Thank you.
On another loose end here, I'm assuming that those of us who had our pictures taken a couple of weeks ago have viewed the online versions of that? No?
I haven't seen that.
Of course, we're prehistoric in technology.
Well, I was current with my email last night, so it wasn't on my email.
No, you have to go to the county website.
Yes,
it's
on the county website.
What?
That would be beyond our capability.
No, no, you don't.
It wasn't on my county, it was on my personal.
It's on your personal, yeah. Whatever email address that you wrote down for the gentleman.
Google search, Marita?
For you? It'll probably break your computers.
I wouldn't advise it.
Okay, that
whole new worlds out there.
unless there's any other comments from supervisors that
All the Tom Tryons in prison?
Mr. CAO.
Well, in a rare departure from my usual content, I do actually have a few things to discuss today. On the 16th, Shirley Wright and I went to the County Administrators Association Budget Summit in Sacramento, and we got the bad news probably a little bit earlier than everyone else did, but at about the same time as the Comptroller's press conference. We are looking locally at what the impacts would be on Calaveras County of a freeze on state payments. Out of hand, I think we're probably okay for about 30 days with our health and CalWorks and the roads. But beyond that, we're going to have some serious problems. So it's obviously best for the county if this is resolved prior to the February 1st deadline. Craig Pedro, the county administrator in Tuolumne County, and I visited the offices of Senators Cox and Cogdill. Senator Cox represents our county. Senator Cogdill's Republican leader represents Tuolumne County. So Craig and I visited both of their offices, spoke to key staff people, expressed our concern as county administrators that this not drag on unduly. Had the chance to visit very briefly with Senator Cox himself while he was on his way to another meeting. We did attempt to contact someone in Berry Hill, but it was not available. The mid-year report we originally scheduled for February 3rd, but because of the uncertainty at the state level, and also because of the uncertainty about where we're going to go with organizing CDA, and the fact that we got our December 31 figures on a timeline that would have let department heads only have 2 days do their estimates. We're going to do that on February 10th. So the mid-year report, there is no significant changes to report. The week's difference is not going to disadvantage us in not being able to take some major action that we would have taken a week before. The next issue is whether we want to consider, and we can discuss this in the context of the mid-year, discuss it next week, whether we want to consider engaging in some limited way lobbying support given the stimulus package. I've accumulated some information on the package. There is going to be a fairly short window of time for localities to get their orders in. With Washington, the ground is changing, remains changing constantly. I had gotten some overtures from CCWD, whose firm, the Carmen Group, handles their lobbying, and with CCWD, we certainly have some common cause on Cosgrove Creek and some of the water issues. I'd like to continue exploring that. Again, we're talking about limited funds, limited time, target specific, in effect, for the county. We did not fund lobbying activities in the 08-09 budget. The $125,000 contract was simply not something that we could sustain, nor is it something to which I would advocate returning at any time in the near future. But there may be some value to this, so I'd like to continue exploring some sort of affiliation. Finally, and I'll distribute these to you, during the meeting, I received a letter of resignation from interim CDA Director Taylor. And I would like to request that we add this issue to the closed session items for this afternoon. Jim, how do we
I move an emergency.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded for emergency addition.
The findings are that this came up after the posting of the agenda, and it needs to be acted upon prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Those are the findings you need to make.
Yes. So the findings are included in the motion, and I second the motion.
I've taken the liberty of preparing language for the closed session, if you agree to add it.
Okay.
Be a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B, Public Employment, Community Development Director, or Planning Director. That would be the closed session.
Okay, we've all heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion.
No.
Okay, it's a 4-1 in favor of the motion.
Incidentally, last time this came up, I incorrectly told Supervisor Walensky that it was a majority vote. You were correct, it's a 2/3 vote. It was then, and it is now.
Did you say why you voted no?
I guess I'll be saying it in another context, given the vote.
Okay. So we'll be discussing this letter of resignation. And do you have any comments to make about this, or you handed this out?
Confidential. Now, did you hand it out?
No, I haven't handed that to the press. I regard it as a personnel document. I just got it during the meeting, so I'd be happy to handle it in accordance with.
I'll check with David on that.
Okay.
We have the press after, so we should give them some heads up. They want to go eat lunch.
Never seen it.
I don't see anything confidential in that.
Are you talking? Are you mumbling, or are you talking?
Mumbling.
Or could you mumble louder so all of us can hear?
Can we pull the board on that?
Yeah, and I have other than those minor items, I have nothing further to trouble the board with this morning.
Okay, Mr. Jones, do you have anything for this point?
Okay, then we'll make copies for the press and
Why don't you give
release
one
it.
to
Yeah, Madeline's make copies distribute them.
I was asked last week or so about a change in the Brown Act. This is on the order of continuing education, and it's very brief. You're all familiar with the rule on serial meetings that prohibits the use of an intermediary for board members to exchange views. That rule, until recently, did not apply to any third party. In other words, staff members or public constituents could lobby a majority of the board, and there was no restriction on that. That has changed slightly. Mostly that's still the rule. Obviously, members of the public and constituents can continue to talk to and share views with the majority of the board. There was one small change that applies to staff, county staff. And it provides that staff can continue to talk to a majority of you about and answer questions, the business as usual, with one small restriction, that is, provided that person does not communicate to members of the legislative body the comments or position of any other member or members of the legislative body. So the only restriction on staff is they can continue to talk to you as before, but they're not permitted to report comments of other board members to you.
You better communicate that to staff.
I have. Yeah. We talked about this at the department head meeting this week, and so the words out. That's the only change in the Brown Act this year.
Madeline, do you have anything for us?
Come on, Maddie.
I thought you were going to say the change was that it applies to the state legislature now, but apparently that wasn't it.
Cold day now.
Okay, well, that concludes the public portion of this meeting. We're going into closed session, and for the board members, I